This war is real. Fighting is everything. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Tempt not the righteous man to draw his sword. Conviction, righteousness, ruthlessness. To understand tolerance, you have to understand the line of intolerance. War is the teacher, soldiers are the students. They become the bards of war. Over this past year, we've been blessed to have many significant influencer voices join this channel for interviews, from General Flynn to Archbishop Vigano to Jim Pugh. And now we have the pleasure of having JUAN SAVIN join us for an amazing discussion on the origins and the challenges that we face as we disassemble and confront one of the greatest evils known to man, which we call the Cabal. So please join me for part 1 of JUAN SAVIN Unplugged.
I enjoy talking to all my heroes, the folks that are doing what you're doing, where they're actually kind of going door to door, street to street to take the country back. You guys are doing the heavy lifting, and I'm not saying that lightly. That's exactly how I feel. So,
oh, thank you very much. It's interesting. I don't know. I kind of told you in the email. Robert Steele and I worked for some of the same people. Just so you know, that's how we first talked when he first came on the scene, which is when he first left his former job. And that was back in 2016 or so. We had a chat then, and it's kind of funny. I say that because there's some voices that have been out here, a while, as we've tried to kind of wake people up a little bit, because this is quite the cabal we're fighting, I guess I should say, right?
Oh, sheesh, to the moon. Well, I mean, if you've been around, you're too. I'll take it for granted. You're too young to remember all the fights back to the early 70s and 60s even. Stuff that I was around as a kid. And the guys, the way they would talk, what they would say about what was going on, stunning. And it's very fresh for me because a lot of those conversations are still ringing in my ears all these decades later. It seems new today, I think, for people just as they're waking up. But for me, even with my, reading and study and the crowd that I ran with, this is, has been around all along. It's just that it's finally come to a head where we can't sustain any longer. You cannot put up with it any longer. And so the time has come to kick them all in the ass and change the mode here.
That's well said. Juan, can you talk a little bit about, your knowledge about DC and its connection to Osiris and all of that picture that you paint, which you've done a great job in a number of interviews. And I just think that is such a critical foundation point to understand how this relates to everything.
Well, if you think about our whole country, at this moment in time, the whole Operation America is centered around Washington, D.C. And I'll get to the monument in just a moment, but I want to think in a little bit bigger sense. Consider that when the Constitution was signed by the leaders of the various states, and they each had a slightly different perspective on what community, some type of corporate collection of citizens and voters and residents meant, and then their local commerce, their communities were built around slightly different ideals. One area being into textiles and the other one into growing tobacco or something, and another one because the commerce trade was done by boats, more marine oriented or something like that. So different states had different focuses. And then they had to come together in this kind of a regional mentality, a collection of states, in order to work together. You know, the local state work is done to protect the community more than else. You know, a policing action from those that would steal from you at the local level, somebody that might try to take business advantage of you and somehow damage you, you know, in your home or your business, steal from you, leverage attacks on you that you then have to pay something, or community resources are applied to building a street on the other guy's property, not yours. And so you got to, you know, get some commissioner to agree that if you're going to spend community money on street, it should be here, not there, and serve everybody's interest, not just somebody that's able to pull somebody to their side somehow. So, you know, within a state or community type of a relationship of citizens, the focus is more internal. As you get you know, to a nation state type of mentality, the problem is you have to worry about pirates, those that would sail in, try to steal something from you and sail off. You have to worry about, you know, a military threat, a marauder threat. So because, you know, other nations could literally have a threat, or even business groups of pirates, if you will, could target you because you're weak. In order to provide a strong defense, you have a policing function internally, and you have a military function where you come together as a group of states, all for one for all. Anybody attacks any state here or there, someplace else, then you all come together to go against that attacker. And so now you're bigger as a community. And so this federalization of states entering into pacts to protect each other, so that anybody that, you know, would think that well, we're just going to get those little guys up there at Delaware or something, because they're small and they haven't got any resources, and they'll be easy to steal from. You touch them and all the states come after you. That's, you know, this federalization of government. Well, as the country has grown, what happened was this administrative function with a central government, a federal government, has grown and grown. And where it really went over the top in modern history is prior to the turn of the century, and at some level going back even to the Civil War, we had a need to, you know, pay for various expenses for this operation of a government a coalition, if you will, of the states, a federal function of the individual states working together. And so early on, we had tariffs, and if there was trade coming in from outside the country, we imposed tariffs on those goods, and that would be the money to run the federal government. And you'd have some money contributed by the states, but it was a pretty small operation. Most functions of government were really done at the state level. You put in a road because the people in your state want to pay for a road. And there was virtually no money coming from the federal government to put in a local road. Very minimal federal presence, stamp, imprint into each of the states. And so they were a co-op, if you will. But the states brought their resources to the federal operation. So you literally had state-run guards or militias. And so if you wanted to have a war, for example, well, each state had to bring, with the governor's approval, their troops to the battle, if you will. And there was, you know, virtually nothing there of a federal army, if you will. The Marines were, the exception there. And so over time, what happened was there was this creation of a federal tax structure, and where the citizens would have to pay money into a federal tax situation, and that tax money suddenly made this minuscule, very slight co-op operation into some kind of a monster, a beast. I had a friend years ago, we kid about it at the time. He had a pet alligator that he got at, I think at Disneyland, I don't remember, I think it was even prior to Disney actually starting in Florida, but it was some kind of a park or something. And so he came home with this little alligator in a box, and his brothers both had one. Theirs died, his lived. So he kept feeding it, and it kept growing. And when it got to about 3 feet, it was still cute, but it was getting more of a nuisance. And then it got 5 and 6 feet, and he had to go off to college. And one day he gets a call from his mom at college, and she's demanding he return home immediately.
I can see where this is going.
And what's the problem? What's the problem? And the alligator has broken down the screen door at the back door where she's throwing food into the backyard for the alligator. He apparently got a little hungrier than normal or something. And so she can't use her patio. She can't use the backyard. She's finally had it. Come take care of your alligator. He had to return home and had to give it to some alligator park or something. What's the problem with alligators? They're green and they eat money. What's the problem with the federal government? It's green and it eats money. It's green with envy for all your money. So we've been feeding all this tax money, every kind of tax you can imagine. 30 years ago, one of the guys wrote a book, and he had looked at all the various federal taxing entities, and he came up with a number of like 90,000. I mean, this is incomprehensible to people. 90,000 different entities that had legal taxing authority out across the country. And, people are, wow, where do you find 90,000? That's just a ridiculous figure. Well, wait a minute. Have you looked at your phone bill lately? You're still paying taxes, federal taxes, for rural electrification. We've had rural electrification for 120 years. You're still paying a federal tax on it to run power lines somewhere for some federal project. You think those hammers that they put on these to build these jet fighters, and they charge $3,000 for a hammer. Well, who's even using a hammer on a jet fighter? But anyway, they got so many scams going. Water districts, Tennessee Valley this authority, and the Columbia Dam stuff. FET taxes, federal transportation taxes on the rubber on your tires in your car. It just goes on and on and on. Taxes on every kind of chemical for, save the planet this and save the planet that. You start adding it all up, and it just becomes spaghetti of obligations, and nobody even knows where all the money is coming from and going into. And that, as Ross Perot said, that sucking sound is the federal government drawing all of the resources out of the whole country. And so the economy of America has become incredibly highly centralized, so that there isn't any action that you can do anywhere disparately across the country. You can't put a sidewalk in Arizona without having to get, federal permits and matching money to make sure that there's not a salmon spawning stream, where you're putting in your sidewalk. It gets insane at some certain point, and that's what's going on. And so the control of the schools, every administrator in every school in every district across the country, well, they have to be careful that all of their guidelines, the way that they deal with their students, meets federal guidelines, because they'll get 10% more money or 15% more money by complying with everything. So all of a sudden the school boards and everybody else is bowing to federal management. And so no function at the community level, at the city level, dog catcher level can be done without federal agreement and matching money. Yes, we chip every puppy that we send out with any new home, and they're also vaccinated and sprayed and, powdered and whatever before they kick their ass out to the new owners. And because we get federal matching money for puppy, distribution from our pound. And it sounds silly when I say it that way, but it's not. It's the facts. The federal government is leveraging and managing every single transaction that you do everywhere you go, and there's a little piece of money coming out of everything, and they're sucking out, it's 1% here and 0.5% there and 0.1% there, and next thing you know, it's real money. Because I remember I was buying a vehicle for one of my businesses, and it, I had one that was really good, but I had a business partner on there, and he was buying something, and I thought, well, I don't want to run mine in the ground, even though I liked it. But I figured, well, might as well update now as long as I'm at it. And there was cash in the bank. And so I went down to order what I wanted, and I happened to call the accountant and says, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pick up another rig. It's $100,000. And I just wanted to let you know. So we had cash in the bank. I was going to pay for it. And he says, well, actually, just a minute. And he does some clicking and pounding and all that. And he says, well, actually, we need to put another $10,000 in because you only got $150 in the bank right this second. And I says, well, okay, why is that? I'm only spending $100,000. He says, well, no, but you got to have money in there for the taxes you're going to have to pay. It's going to be about $160 that you need so you can buy the $100,000 vehicle. I'm like, what? Let me think about this for a second. I'm pretty good on this stuff, but I started adding it all up, and he's like, yeah, well, that's what you got to have, because by the time you pay all of the taxes you're going to owe on that purchase and the sales tax and everything else, and then also in order to have $100,000 left over after you pay your federal taxes and your withholding taxes, your Social Security and everything else, we need to have about $160 in the bank. And then we're going to pay our taxes out of that. We're going to pay the state taxes on the sales tax and all that. And then you'll have your $100,000 left for the vehicle. I'm like, I thought about it for a minute. I was just sitting there ready to write the check. And I thought about it for a minute or two. And I said, you know what? Screw that. And I had the vehicle I'd been using. And it occurred to me, I said, I'm just going to take and put new engine in that sucker. It doesn't exactly need it, but I fix things before there's a problem because I could not have something fail at a critical moment. And I had about a month when I was going to be out of the country. And so I said, you know what? I'm just taking it over. I'm going to put a NASCAR quality motor in that sucker. I had a builder that was building engines for one of a car that I was racing. In a NASCAR circuit. So I took it over to my engine builder. I says, pull that engine tranny out, rebuild it, build it to these particular specs. And I told them all the things I wanted. And so they put about a $25,000 engine transmission in this rig. And then I had it, while they were doing that, I had it sent over, had it repainted a way that I wanted it. And some upgrades that I wanted in the interiors and like that. And so I ended up spending about $35,000 on this rig to have it rebuilt. And I said, we rebuild the aircraft. They go through a C-check, and we just rebuild them, and then go out and they go through another life cycle. I'm just going to do that with this because there's nothing wrong with the vehicle. I love the vehicle. And I actually, even looking at it, I thought the vehicle that was 3 years older was better in the way it was laid out than the newest model. So I said, no, I'm just going to keep this one. And so I spent 35 grand. And on top of that, by the way, because it was a business expense, it was a maintenance expense, it was a repair expense. Now I had something to offset income, and it was cheaper for me to just rebuild what I had because of the way the federal government had the tax stuff laid out than it was for me to buy new. Now, that really ticks me off at another level because an important business decision was made based on somebody else out in Congress and the tax policy people and all that, all their minutia forced me to make a particular type of business decision that at the end of the day, it favored the engine builder and you know, interior and paint guys because they got some work out of it, but it didn't favor you know, renewing and upgrading and keeping new with equipment. It really penalized you know, commerce. So then you look at what happens later in the year, that same year. This was a year where there was some economic crises going on in the country. So the federal government turns around and says, well, if you get rid of your clunker, and if you buy new, we'll give you this big one-time tax savings thing. And I think, as I recall, it was like an accelerated depreciation rate or something. And so my accountant calls up and says, you know, if you wanted to still buy one of those rigs, you could do it now, and it actually will make sense. And I said, I already redid what I got. I'm happy with what I got. But I did end up doing that for a couple of employee vehicles. And so the whole point is you had Washington, D.C. controlling policies in the way that they administered the tax to try and cause everybody out across the country to spend, don't spend, spend, don't spend, step on the gas, don't step on the gas. And who was it favoring in this particular situation? Well, it was bankers, because the bankers and the, I think GMAC was, you know, about to go bankrupt or something. And, you know, so they came up with a policy that favored them, which is one of the, you know, money side of GM and some of the other people and other companies that were run well. By the way, Ford, I'm a Ford guy. They didn't take the federal money because they hadn't done all the mischief to put themselves into a crisis that some of the other automakers did. And so the federal government decided that they did things to favor lousy business practices over at GM by bailing them out by a tax favorable tax thing and clunker thing that essentially bailed out GM. So a lousy operation as a car building and sales operation was promoted and assisted, and a great well-run operation like Ford had been doing at that time, they got their competitor helped against them. Their good business practices were penalized, and the lousy business practices were favored. Same thing happened, you know, Chrysler, you know, had to go through a bailout. Now they paid it all back, and I give them credit for that back in the 80s. But when Lee Iacocca came in and just took shares instead of income, and bet his time that he could bring the company back, and did great stuff, brought the Caravan out and all that, and did great stuff. But at the end of the day, you have the federal government deciding who's going to win and who's going to lose amongst these various players. Now, all of that conversation, what I'm trying to say here is that you have this federal machine, this highly centralized operation running every facet of the operations around the country at very far away places. There's a saying, I believe it was Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, I take it back, I think it said it. If the federal government, if you know, the feds are essentially telling you when to plant and when to reap, you will soon be wanting for food. If you have one person telling everybody, okay, everybody plant right now, and then later they telling everybody reap right now, it's very inefficient. And the reason is because out across a country like ours, when you should plant and when you should harvest in Iowa is different than it is in northern Montana, is different than it is in eastern Washington or in southern California. Their climates, their altitudes, their wind and water rain patterns are totally different. So there's no one way that suits all of them. That's why even the operation of the states, the way a state spends money in South Carolina makes a different kind of sense than the way a state spends money in Delaware or in California to support its citizens. And when you have one little tiny speck on the map where all those decisions are made by just a handful of people, it doesn't necessarily favor good, efficient operations. For example, even in my corporations, what if I want to do R&D and develop new products and not have to think about, gee, is it time I got to buy new vehicles because otherwise I'm not going to get the tax advantage if I don't get it in before the end of the month? Maybe I need to spend the money on R&D and they're not favoring R&D today, or I need to spend the money on more employees or less. But the Fed's favoring one direction or the other. You got these people that are stepping on the gas and hitting the brakes, 1,000 miles, 5,000 miles away, and it doesn't, and they're micromanaging how I run my business, how I operate, how I think. And why? Because they're thinking of their big operation, their big federal operation. Well, that's centralized government. And so America has gone from local control, local management and jurisdictions in the municipalities, the cities, in the counties, in the state, of every aspect of life. Instead of the sheriff of the county who's elected by the citizens enforcing the law there in his county, they'd like to have everything monitored and supervised and controlled at some federal level. They've gone out of control. It's lost this local citizen authority, with the feds overriding every action. I remember I was out in Oregon during the era when they had the problems that led to the death of little boy Finicum, murder, really, my opinion. And I was with the sheriff of the county there, and they had a bunch of feds that came in and just decided to park in a park and start doing something. And he says, I got to leave and go find out what's going on here, because they're not going to do this stuff in my county. And they are just running roughshod, and they need to notify me and let me know what's going on and what their plans are. And they're just coming in here like they run my county, and they don't run my county. I was elected to run my county. And that was a great guy. In fact, that's part of the thing with the sheriffs, Sheriff Mack, constitutional sheriffs group. They're having to remind the feds who has authority for policing in these various counties, including tax law. You get the IRS comes in, wants to just do anything they want in a lot of places, and in a lot of these counties, the local sheriffs have to remind them, you do things based on a certain way of enforcing whatever things you want to enforce. And some of the stuff they enforce isn't law. It's administrative law. It's not constitutional law. So all of that still coming back. Now you're seeing this federal situation where they're leveraging all that money is being pulled out of the country and brought to this central pot in the middle of the country. And when they do that, that money is power. So as they draw it out of the rest of the country and they bring it into Washington, now you got a handful of elected officials who are deciding where to send it and how to send it, et cetera. And they're telling the federal agencies, here, you get this much money, you get that much money, you can do this thing and there. And they become very powerful. That alligator just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Once it reaches a certain point, now it wants to kick down the screen door and come into the pantry and take anything it wants, any time it wants, because it's so big that even the door, the Constitution, the local rules won't stop that thing from getting into the kitchen. And what's happening in America right now is your mom is calling, hey, get that alligator and get it out of here. That's the federal government. Come home, get the alligator, and get it out of here. Do whatever you got to do. I don't care what you got to do. I don't want to see what you got to do if you got to do it. I want that alligator out of here. I want my house back. I want my yard back. I want my pantry back. I want the sunroom back. I don't want that thing in this yard anymore. I don't want it terrorizing the neighbor kids if it gets loose through the fence. Get it out of here. That's the federal government. That's what's happening to America right now. They're completely out of control. Completely out of control. Do you understand? Completely out of control. Executive order this, executive order that, executive order another thing, executive order, over and over. Everything's an executive. It's an emergency. It's an emergency. Yes, everything is an emergency. Gotta hold the country under our grip. Okay? That's the federal government right now. And now I come back to your original question. That fucking monument in the middle of the city, at the center of the city that is running your country right now, is this huge spire, this monument in stone. The entire city of Washington, D.C. is built around that spire. Every function of our federal government is built around that spire. And that sucking sound you hear is all of those people that bow and worship and honor and think it's just so great, that spire. Now, you put a good name on it. The Washington Monument. Our president, it's a wonderful thing. Oh, and everybody bows. Oh, it's so, it means so many wonderful things. It's so beautiful to look at. It's tall, it's magnificent. Everywhere in the city you can see it. You can see it as you're driving in from any angle, and the whole city is, the skyline is dominated by it. Well, what is the meaning of that thing that's the center of everything in the city? You know, when the presidents are sworn in, they're facing the monument. They have their Bible in front of them and they're putting their hand on it and their face is to the monument. When Obama had to do the second swearing in because they thought they might have made a mistake on the first one, they go into a room in the White House and he's sworn in and you see the pictures of him and there's a picture behind him. It's the architect of Washington, D.C. who's in this picture behind the president while he's got his hand on the Bible or, you know, whatever books that were really there, etc. And he's being sworn in and saying his oath. Well, if you look at where his eyes are and you look overhead at what the layout is there in the White House, oh, and there's a window right in front of him. And what's outside the window? The Washington fucking Monument. Again, give me a fucking break. And by the way, I said that specific word for a very specific reason, and I will come back to that in a few minutes. Because Washington, D.C. is built around that. What's the meaning? Why? Every city, or I mean every street in the city, every angle of every street in the city, the holy city of Washington, D.C., that every citizen in this country is having to pay homage to bow to curtsy to kneel to. For what purpose, by the way? Why? Because we all pay homage to this city. We pay alms to this city to keep it in control of us. The Constitution was a decentralizing document. It allowed no function of government to take place at any higher level than was necessary to accomplish its purposes. So when you look at what's happening in America right now and you compare it with the constitutional contract between the citizens and the government. Remember, the Constitution is your contract. A lot of people, they go to work for a company, or you buy a car or a house or something like that, and you make a contract. Okay, we agree to make these payments at this time, and you agree that we get title at the end when we finish making the payments. It's a contract between two parties. You buy a piece of property, whatever, a work agreement. The union works out a contract, so the employees get this much an hour for this thing, and they get their holiday pay, and they get, matching money for their health care, etc. It's a contract. It's an agreement between parties. Okay, well, the Constitution is a contract between the American population, the citizens in the various states, and the federal government. So when you look at that contract, if one party doesn't fulfill its obligations under the contract, the other party can sue. The other party can, protest in the court, or in many cases, a contract is considered null and void if either party violates the agreements within the contract. And so here in America, the Constitution is that agreement about how the citizens convey various authorities to the federal government. The states convey authority to a federal co-op government, if you will, and how it's going to work. When the federal government doesn't abide by the agreement, the Constitution, there's a problem. Now, what the Constitution in part protects is decentralization of power. So, for example, if you have, you got to put a sidewalk in, or you want to build a house, and you have a building agreements because you're in an earthquake zone or a flood zone or something like that, and you don't want to cause problems for other people or danger somehow, or the next guy that buys it doesn't know, the risk you are because of where you are in a floodplain or something. You have codes and community standards and obligations like that, and it's done at kind of a local level. And that makes sense because people locally kind of know what's going on, and then they see the guy that's administering that area of government on the street, in the store, around the community, and it's somebody that everybody knows and has contact with. And if you're going to try and corrupt something, Al Capone style, even Al Capone was limited to Chicago and the regions around it for the most part. All the other crime families were, New York or Florida or Louisiana, Texas, even the Dixie Mafia, still a small region. Why? Because as you get further and further out, it gets harder and harder and more unwieldy to corrupt officials, government people, police, etc. It gets unwieldy. And so they have their own little fiefdom. And if the people realize what's going on, they can come against it at the local level and push back on it and try to stop it. And so policing functions are done at more of a local level, generally, and more appropriately at a local level. And if things really get out of hand, people can pick up and move and go somewhere else where the corruption isn't so bad, because they're not going to live under that. The federal government is this thing where all of a sudden everything becomes the same everywhere you go. And you have all of your officials that run it are way over in Washington, D.C. They're not home at the local level. You know, if you have corruption in Chicago, you can, you know, decide as a community to come against it and try to vote it out. And it's harder to hide the corruption. Everybody's aware of it. People move away to a different community because they just can't live under that local corruption that way. The Constitution is this decentralizing document that keeps power in the states, in the local communities, and doesn't hand it over to somebody else huge, except to protect us from huge external threats, people that would come and dismantle us from outside, other countries, nation-state level threats, where the co-op of states come together, band together, and bring their armies together for some mutual defense pact, if you will, not to be managed internally in some huge, humongous way like the alligator running roughshod over the whole house, but to protect from foreign parties coming in to take us over from the outside, steal and maraud and rape and pillage and everything else. The federal government's focus, external to the states and to America, has been shifted, and now it's all internal. It's all about managing all the states. The states have lost their rights. And the corruption, where corruption occurs, if you were going to try and corrupt America out across all the states, you might have to pay off 50, 100,000 people, local legislatures and senators and city officials and vote counting people and everything like that. And it becomes quite burdensome. But when everybody's in DC, it's a highly leveraged, localized position, just like a teeter-totter. There's a fulcrum that it twists back and forth over that pivot point. And so the whole world is pivoting back and forth over that pivot point of Washington, D.C. And that's what's carrying all the balances. Well, a little move here, a little move there, and it changes the dynamic radically. It changes the pivot point for the whole country. And if you want to affect it, instead of having to pay off, bribe, control, manipulate tens of thousands of people out at the local level, now all you got to do is control 535 congressmen, 100 senators, a few judges here and there. And now you got it. You can do anything you want. So maybe you got to, and you don't have to do all of them. You just got to do a certain percentage of them that lean something a certain way. So, for example, in this election thing, the whole country didn't vote Biden, and they didn't have to throw the vote on the whole country. You only had a half dozen states, 4 states really, where the vote was corrupted adequately that the whole country has to live with the consequences of their vote, of their corruption. It's like Chicago now runs the whole country with its corruption, as opposed to having to go out and corrupt every place. You just got to get a couple of them at pivot positions, and you can change the direction of the whole country. It's the tail wagging the dog. So when you look at what's happened with our federal government, this highly centralized system sucks all the energy out of the country, right down to this little speck postage stamp in 1,000 acres of land called Washington, D.C. And a few officials can change the direction of the country, change tax law, change policing law, change the relationship between our country and other countries, cause businesses to be exported and people to be imported, allowed through the border, whatever. And what the state wants, if Texas doesn't want people flowing over the border like an endless parade, or Arizona or California, the federal government tells you, no, you got to let those people through. You got to, do this way and do this that way. And the state doesn't have any control. The local citizens don't have any control. That's different than what it used to be. That's a centralized power, and the ability for the bad guys to only have to corrupt a handful of officials, a relatively small number of officials, in order to pull off a big ripoff, a big theft against the American people. A couple mobsters in Chicago running the whole city their way. Only this time it's the whole country. The Constitution is a decentralizing document. It keeps power out at the state and citizen and municipal and county level. It doesn't give the federal government huge, power over every aspect of your life, except for one thing. When you come to tax law and you suck the life out of the country, you suck all the excess and some out of the country. You feed that alligator, it gets bigger and stronger and tougher and more voracious every second. And now the federal government's running roughshod over everything, deciding what vote machines get favored because they get a federal tax break for using this style of vote machine. That, by the way, is crooked because a couple guys got paid off one way or another to make sure that there was federal matching money and grant money and other stuff to pick a certain type of vote machine so that certain people behind the scenes can manipulate the vote machines and then lock in the vote forever anywhere in the country that you're at far distant places, and they get control and they keep control. And as long as they're sucking the life out, you can make any law you want about sidewalks in Arizona, but without the federal government giving you the rest of the money you need to finish it, you'll never finish a sidewalk because you don't have enough money left over after all the taxes, all the federal stuff. And so you're pleading, please, please, please give us back some of our money that we sent you so we can use it to, have some jobs here locally. And then, by the way, why are they so pissed off at President Trump? Because he slowed down this whole defense thing and called bullshit on some defense projects that were just insane, that favored, a little band of local people at certain places that were getting, jobs locally. The whole country has to pay for jobs locally for one operation that builds military widgets that don't do what they're supposed to do. They don't protect the people. They don't keep us safe. They just cost a pile of money. But there's jobs in that senator's district. There's jobs in that congressman's district. And he brought home the bacon at the expense of the whole rest of the country. Brought home the bacon at the expense of every other taxpayer. What's fair about that? We're being forced because somebody's little, and I'll say it just exactly this way. Somebody's butt-fucking buddy is getting jobs for their little local thing, and then they become more powerful, and so that favors them. It's not in the best interest of the American people. It's just in the best interest of that little clique who has enough payoff money and enough leverage with their congressional party to pull these jobs in and do a contract on some military thing that isn't really about defense. It's about a payoff, and it happens over and 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 over till at some point it no longer even remotely makes any sense anymore. And then you look at Washington, D.C. Why? How has this happened? Who's behind this? How did it occur? How did it develop? Well, it's a club. It's a secret handshake club. It's a bunch of buddies working together, frat boys, college boys, all that go to the same fraternities, go to the same schools, the same bloodlines. Yeah, my dad, my grandpa, my great-grandpa, we all went to the same college. We got this heritage. Yeah, and you got your little Skull and Bones and 50 other organizations, the Orangemen, Scroll and Key, over and over. The list just goes, it's like 100 different little private clubs and fraternities, and they all work together, and we're helping you and you help us. It's a secret handshake between all of these people. And what do? They self-promote. They mutually self-promote. You promote our guy here, and he'll take care of getting you that money there. We'll promote your guy over here, and you'll get your money there. And what's happening? Behind the scenes, America's being administered by a cult, a club. And it's not just one, it's multiple of them working together collusively, not in the best interests of the farmer in Nebraska, but in the best interests of people that have alliances in their families against the interests of America, that have global aspirations, global interests. They don't want the factory here in America because they don't control how the money gets spent here. They can control you and how much money you got to spend for it, but you got to pay to move your factory from here to Japan, China, South America, because you can't make things green enough here. And oh, by the way, over there, they can't either. And they're way worse, but they're a growing economy. They're, a third world country, and we have to make an exception for them. So your Congress votes a law that you got to pay. They get a tax break, again, for moving your company, your job, your production to some other country to help the world. At whose expense? Yours? Yeah. Your family's? Yeah. That's what's been happening over and over and over again. Who's making those decisions? The little clubs all around Washington. And every street angle in Washington, every building at its base, at its corner, is marked, branded, tattooed with their marks, their ideas, their way of doing things. You think that it's just Washington, it's the home of the seat of democracy and capitalism and the American people's, holy city. Yeah, holy full of shit. That monument is actually got very ancient roots. The monument, the Washington Monument, that spire, that monolith, has religious symbology. All of Washington, D.C. is built around religious symbology that goes back to the Greeks and the Romans, into Egypt, and to Babylon itself. The story of the Washington Monument is about the story of Osiris. Who is Osiris? What's the god Osiris? What's that all about? Osiris was this god that was portrayed as being the most wicked of all the gods. And his brother Set was the sweetest, nicest, most benevolent god of all the gods. Both of them were born twins to Isis. And Isis, this female god, had sex with Zeus, who played around a lot, and Zeus screws around with Isis. She gets pregnant and has twins. Okay, and one's a good twin and one's a bad evil twin, kind of like a Cain-Abel type story. At some point, Set, the good god, decides that the evil, the horrors, the corruption of Osiris are so great that he must kill his brother. Now, one thing I'll tell you is that they're into the flip. They're into the reversal of roles. They're into twisting the way things look like. So you have a biblical narrative, Abel good, Cain bad. Here, now you're saying that, and Cain kills his brother Abel. Here you're having the good brother Set, and they want to flip the whole roles because it's demons that are really doing this. And so the good brother Set kills the evil brother Osiris. And when Set killed Osiris, he chopped his body into 14 pieces. And then Set scattered the pieces all around the earth because he's a god. He can run all over the place pretty quickly. A little later in the day, on the same day, and this was on the 17th of the first month of the year. A little later in the day, on this 17th date, Isis, the mother of the twins, finds out that Set has killed Osiris, and she's all upset and horrified and distraught over this. So she quickly races out across the earth, and she finds, being a god, she finds 13 of the 14 pieces of her son that have been chopped up, and brings them all to one place and assembles them. And the 14th part of his body she can't find, and it's been eaten by a fish is one of the legends. Of course, they always have, there's 15 variations on the legend, but essentially the 14th piece has been eaten by a fish. And there's all sorts of mythology. It goes to the Dogon tribes and the aliens from outer space and stuff, and I could go into it in depth, but it'd take hours, so it's not worth it. So what happens is that she assembles all the pieces she could find, and then because she can't find his penis, because it's been eaten by a fish, she fashions a penis for her dead son's corpse out of stone. And she fastens it to his body. So she literally makes a stone dildo and attaches it to his body. Then she decides to have sex with her dead son's corpse. Now think about, this is a religion, okay? This is an occult religion. Occult means hidden. Okay, so hidden right in plain sight, where everybody can see it, is hidden meaning, occult meaning to everything they do. So Isis, the mother, has sex with her dead son's corpse and this stone dildo, and then supposedly gets pregnant by her son through the dildo in this dead corpse. Now this is how twisted their religion is. Think of what the symbology, the imagery of what I'm saying. And this is the mother and the son. So then she becomes pregnant and she has a child, and the child is Horus. And Horus is the sun god. And Horus brings light and life to the world. Horus is like literally the sun in the sky that you see over you, every day in their religion. And as a monument in stone, as a memorabilia, a symbol of their religion, their occult beliefs, their occult practices, they believe that the sun god, Horus, the sun in the sky, is here to keep the earth warm and take care of us because of this act of Osiris interacting with his mother through his dead corpse and impregnating her and causing the sun god to come into existence. Amongst these groups within their little club, they're actually not kidding, and they're not upset with laughing about being a mother fucker. They're laughing right in your face about that. The city that is the center of your whole nation of America is built around a monument that is honoring symbolically this motherfucking act. And even the way that it's positioned, the exact longitude and latitude where it's positioned on the planet. Remember Washington, President Washington, what was he before he became president and a general and everything else? It's his work was that of a surveyor. And what was he doing? He had to find the exact location on the planet where this monument had to be, this city had to be built around for their religion. You have an entire religious city. Washington, D.C. is as religious a city as the Vatican is in Italy. So this is a religious city. It's an occult, hidden religious city. that monument is as important to this occult religion that's running Washington, D.C., that is built around, that is by leverage at this fulcrum, at this focal point, running America, that by extension is controlling, leveraging, running the world. That monument is as important to them in their religion, running the world, as the cross is to Christians. Why? Because at the cross in Christianity, humanity, the children of Adam, were saved from the consequences, the penalty of sin, when sin was placed on the Messiah, on the Christ. And he atoned for that sin, being perfect. He could take on the sin of the world and die for the sin of the world, for all of humanity. Whereas if he hadn't been divinely perfect, he would have had to die for his own sin. But being perfect, he could take on others' sin and die in their place. So the cross and the death at the cross, that crossroads of time and history, Christ is this Redeemer. He, through his death, the world is saved, and then his resurrection. They believe in their religion that when Osiris had sex with the dead corpse, with the dildo attached to the dead corpse, and then became impregnated, that the world was saved on that day, and all of the action of Osiris and Isis and Set occurred in one day. He was killed, his parts scattered across the earth, then regathered by the mother and assembled, and the dildo made, and the sex where she became impregnant, all happened on the 17th day of the month. So the number of Osiris, the magical number of Osiris, is 17. And in the occult, in witchcraft and sorcery, the maximum magnification of a spell is 3 times. So the witch turns 3 times in the circle to get the maximum magnification of a spell or something that they're doing. When the people go into the House of Commons there in Europe, and they want to approach, go into the bench, etc., and present, they knock 3 times on the door. The judge pounds the gavel 3 times. It's this magic spell magnification. When you think of 17, for example, here in America, and you want to see the leverage of this cult into America, of the magic, well, what do you call the most magical, top secret site in the continental U.S.? Area 51. 3 times 17, 51. Maximum magnification of the spell, the magic, the control. 17's their number. The devil doesn't do anything original. He takes things that God has created, God has done, and then he tries to flip them and twist them and own them in a different way. So, for example, 5 is the number of grace to Christians. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, 5 is the number of grace. But to the occult, the same number has a different meaning. 5 is the number of death to enemies and defense. So here in this holy city, the Pentagon is a 5-sided building. What's the function of the Pentagon? Death to enemies and defense. So 5, the building has to be 5-sided because it has occult meaning. It has hidden meaning, secret meaning. And by the way, what was the date that the ground was broke for the Pentagon? It was the groundbreaking ceremony was on 9/11, 1942. So there was symbolic meaning in this date that was chosen. Death to enemies and defense. In this occult city, why was the 9/11 so critical even then? Because this holy city of Washington, this unholy city, 9/11 in the ancient understanding is the birth date, the true birth date of Christ, 3 BC. So Jesus, the Messiah, was born on 9/11, 3 BC. And there was a signs in the heavens, Virgo giving birth at that time. You come forward modern times, what happened on 9/11 in the modern times? That was a ritual. It was an occult ritual at a very precise time where all the numbers had to match. Why 9/11? Well, could 9/11 have happened on 9/10? No. Could it have happened on 9/12? No. If it had happened, it wouldn't have had the ritual magic, the branding, to give it the power and strength that they wanted it to have. And so 9/11 had to happen on 9/11. And the coding with the way the phone stuff was done. Go back and look at David Rockefeller when he did his Newsweek article, the edition that was published, I believe it was 9/11, 1967, commemorating the building of the towers, the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center. That was, they knew well in advance when they wanted to have this happen. If you go into the Catholic churches in various parts of the world, you'll see IXXI in Roman numerals on a lot of the buildings in various locations. What's the meaning? Well, in Roman numerals, X equals 10. If you place a 1 to the left of it, that would make it a 9. If you were to place, say, 2 or 3, that would make it an 8 or a 7. So to the left, you go down from 10. So IX is 9. Now, if you add an X to the right, or an I to the right of the X, X plus 1 is 11. If you added 2 or 3, it'd be 12 or 13. So IXXI is 9/11. And that's the true birth date of Christ. So why would you do 9/11 on 9/11 in modern times? Because you have to sully and damage this date symbolically, because inside the cults, they know what the true meaning is, and the devil, the demons, can't stand to have that date ever honored or known in any favorable way. It's perpetually a horror date, something evil. And Washington, D.C., every street, every angle, every building here is symbolically, has symbolic meaning to the cult, because this is their equivalent of the Vatican. And at the very center of that city, at the center of this time clock of Washington, D.C., is the Washington Monument. Even actions done here around the city, the exact time they're done, where's the shadow from the sun being cast, or the moon in certain ceremonies? Where's it being cast around the city on this sundial effect of the city? You'll find lots of times decisions are made, they're posted, news conferences are done at the exact time that the shadow is passing over that ritual building or location from the tip of the Washington Monument, because it's a big hourglass dial. Horus, the sun in the sky, casting a shadow across the image of his father, and this dildo, because how are they born again? As I said, the cross is the place where eternal life is gained by those that follow the Judeo-Christian religion. Well, Christians anyway. Some Jews that believe that Christ was Messiah. The cross is that place where we find eternal life, forgiveness from sins. The Washington Monument is as important to the cult as the cross is to Christians. Why? Because that's where they find life. Their cult of Osiris was born again on the 17th of the month, when the mother, through sex with the corpse, conceived and had a child, a Messiah to their cult. And so this is the monument to the cult at the center of the city. Now, to people that don't believe in that religion, don't believe in that cult, this sounds crazy, insane, silly. How could people believe such a stupid thing, that some baked out twisted mom has sex with the corpse, with the dildo attached to the corpse, and then became pregnant? Well, it's their religion. They can believe what they want, but they've built a whole city around it, and the imagery and symbology of that event. And your country, your nation, that you profess to be a Christian nation. Oh, we believe in God in heaven. We believe in Christ. We believe in forgiveness of sins. But your whole country is built around this unholy city. And at the center of that city, every function pivots off of that dildo. Fuck you. As crazy as that sounds, that's what they're doing. Now, let me just add this before we go on. Let me just add one thing. I'm almost done. What you have to think about here is that the fate of the world is really pivoting off of 3 locations on the planet, and all 3 locations are built around monuments of the same type. The City of London is the financial, religious city running the world. The city at the Vatican is this religious city built around a spire, a dildo in the middle of the city. It's about the Christian faith, etc. Well, somebody's captured that operation. Here in America, Washington Monument, it's a captured operation. Our city, our capital, is a captured operation. And everything is pivoting off of this secret handshake crowd that's running our country, and by extension, running the world. And this moment in time that we're living in is about the pushback. When the people showed up here on the 6th of January, they were praying. They were at a type of a worship service almost, and coming against this unholy rule of the Capitol. They were portrayed falsely as coming here to riot and pillage and kill and murder and everything else. But we have plenty of videos that show that that's the farthest possible thing from the truth. Even what supposedly happened in the Capitol, highly suspect on a lot of the details there. So at the end of the day, Christians showed up here to be counted, to take the country back, and to put their foot down and say, no, we're not going to let this city run roughshod over the whole country, and these people in Congress, etc., not administer the laws. They came to be counted and make their presence known, and then they went back home all across the country. This federal city and its policing operations are trying to arrest those people and portray them as having come here to destroy everything and part of some plot to, take over America. Well, who's the real plotters? Who's behind this? What's really going on? And the last thing I would tell you is this. Out across the churches in America, when you look at churches all across America, and other religions, by the way, too, you see these spires, these steeples on the churches. Oh, well, it was a clock tower, it's a bell tower, whatever. Even there's the symbology, ringing the bell. They have symbolic meaning that has sexual connotations. And it's about this merging, this hybridization of our society around their religion, your Christianity, your Judaism, even into the Muslims and other religions. They are capturing the way you think, making hybrids. And so these steeples with the cross on top, what are you really looking at? You're looking at the dildo with a cross attached, as though that somehow makes it okay. Where do these Masonic groups meet? A lot of times in the basement of churches. You have this blended situation, this hybridization. In their mind, Eve was beguiled, had sex with Lucifer, Satan, Samael, the devil, and became pregnant with Cain. And then she went and taught Adam the trick, and Adam impregnated her with Abel. And so Abel and Cain were twins, different fathers, same mother in the same birth cycle. And so you have this war going on planet Earth between the children. Since Abel was killed, the next child was Seth. So the children of Seth, who were direct descendants from Adam, and children of Cain, whose father was the devil. And we're both growing up in this world, and you're watching this fight between the Cainites and the Sethites, or the Adamites, for control of planet Earth. And this religion, this cult, this Osiris cult, is about promoting and protecting the Cainite race against the Adamic race. They believe they're more than human, that they're hybridized, with their father, the devil, being an alien from outside. And by the way, people talk about the reptile, aliens. They're laughing at you, because the reptile aliens, in their mind, Satan, the serpent, was a reptile. Satan, the serpent, had sex with Eve and was cursed to crawl on the earth when this was revealed by God, and he cursed Satan and made him crawl in the dust of the earth. He became a reptile, or he was a reptile, but changed his physical state. And so in their mind, if you have a hybrid, if you have aliens, it's the reptilians walking amongst us, the bloodline families, descendants of Cain. And this evil, because Osiris is their father, he was the most evil of all in their mind. Osiris, the reptilians, the hybrids, have to get control of the children of Adam and destroy them, because they're always going to be a threat to them in their religion. And the use of these cities, these holy cities, to manipulate and control the people, these leveraged locations to control the rest of the population of the earth and to rein them in, to starve them out, deindustrialize them, take away the right to build or make or own, take away their ability to use their money their own way, or what it even is, denominating what money is. They control all of that. They control you. They can starve you out. They can kill you off, because this is their payback. This is them killing Abel once and for all. The conflict between good and evil, Satan and God, that was there present at the Garden of Eden, trying to bring mankind under a curse, with Satan impregnating Eve, this Lucifer, this devil, whatever you want to call him, Satan by 1,000 names, to destroy God's creation, to hybridize it. That's still going on today. And that's the fight, in a nutshell, between the American people and the world. And this cult, which is being administered, which is being operated from the center of your unholy city in the middle of your country, take that to church on Sunday under your steeple with a cross on it and pray about it to God. That's what I would tell the American people today.
At the center of this fight is the military in one way or another. And you mentioned the five-sided part of the Pentagon, and in one way or another now they are kind of at the center of all of this by, if you want to say, their allegiance or vote to who's going to be president. What would be your thoughts on that whole direction and where we are right now?
Well, let me see if I understood the question correctly. What you're asking me is, is the military the key to saving the country? If the policing has become unable to control the federal government at the local and state level, if the Congress and the states have been unable to control themselves or to control the federal government. If it's out of control, if the alligator's loose and now it's broken down the screen door and it's threatening to break into the kitchen, who's going to protect us from this monster? If it's out of control, it's a 12-foot alligator now, and you're not, mom is not going to be able to beat it out of the kitchen with the broom. Who's going to protect us? Is it the police officer with a sidearm? Is it somebody internal, if they even have the authority, or is it something else? And if I understand the question correctly, what I've said to other audiences is that at this point in time, we've seen in this national drama from the election forward that vote fraud has been sanctioned. It's okay. That even with the knowledge and understanding that there's been manipulation of lying facts, digital Pearl Harbor, America was struck, attacked by a digital Pearl Harbor to take control of the country in this vote fraud. That fraud came from foreign powers, a bunch of NATO countries working together, people collusively working from our own intelligence agencies inside CIA, along with British MI6 and MI5, and Mossad and other intelligence agencies working together to capture America by picking its leaders through a fraudulent vote, to put their Manchurian candidates into power over America, to spend our money their way for their advantage, to control America, the alligator running the kitchen. So with that in mind, how are we going to stop that? How can we stop it? Are you going to do it with citizens with pitchforks? Are you going to do it even with law enforcement from within the states? Is it possible for them to stop this federal monster, this federal alligator, from tearing the whole house apart from the inside out? And it's been my contention that at this point in time, that's not possible. That Congress, when it had a chance to correct and to administrate, to take control of a fraudulent vote and outcomes, failed both before and after the fact to protect America from this external threat. Enemies foreign, who conspired together to manipulate the vote in America through the Dominion vote machines, which, by the way, Dominion countries, that's a British term. Even the name of the machine denotes its authorship and origins. This Dominion system, words mean things. They like that name because they can dominate us through the vote. The Dominion vote system, to steal our vote from us, steal our country from us, one congressman at a time, one senator at a time, one judicial appointment at a time, till you can't get it back because it's a huge ship. You can't turn this thing around. You're headed for the rocks and nothing can stop you. You haven't got control of the helm of the ship. And finally, they get a different captain in there, and they're going to, take us on the rocks for sure. The reality is that no individual state is capable of doing this. Look what Texas tried to do in protesting. The Dominion machine, when Texas looked at the Dominion vote counting machine, they had an internal finding, and I think it was like 170 pages or something, where they wrote this scathing report looking at the Dominion vote machine and said that, the thing was designed for a fraudulent vote, that every aspect of the machine was designed to allow a corrupt vote to get through. that there was no aspect of it that was trustworthy. And so they said, not on your life. Texas isn't allowing Dominion machines to be used in Texas elections. Well, who wanted that Dominion machine in there? What elected official wanted, and groups of officials wanted that Dominion machine in Texas? And why would any real citizen looking for a fair and honest vote want a machine that was so fragile, as they said in the report there in Texas, so easily perverted in the vote? You had 10 and 12-year-old kids going in there and changing the vote in the machine, remotely. So the machine wasn't robust at all. And then who's saying, no, it's robust, it's okay? What other states, how in these other states was Texas able to come up with a 170-page report outlining how fragile and susceptible to vote fraud the Dominion system was, but none of these other states saw the same thing? Are you serious? Seriously. And who was behind getting the machines in those places that didn't want to see that? People that wanted to be able to manipulate and control the vote because they wanted an outcome other than what the people in their area would want, would vote for, would agree to. Why? Because they wanted to steal the community, steal the tax dollars, steal the legislation, so they could control the locals against their own best wishes and interests by stealing the vote and putting players in that would do their bidding, their will, against the desires of the local people. And that happened out across the whole nation. And you didn't even have to get the Dominion system in Texas only. It just had to be a couple of vulnerable places, and the whole country, and now the whole world, is left with the consequences of a frauded vote in certain small jurisdictions, a handful of states, where they were able to get it through and tweak the vote far enough to throw the whole election off. And then, because the local officials at the state level couldn't turn back the vote, there couldn't be a lawful action to flip it over because the courts wouldn't let you do something in a federal election from the local level. And because the judges blocked action, the real merits of the validity of the vote haven't been heard, only standing. All these cases that were denied to go forward through the courts, it was standing that was the common theme. They'd say, well, you don't really have the legal right to make a claim here. You're not the aggrieved party. So the court's not going to hear your case because you're not directly affected here or there. And so they just kept shutting cases down. It's like the birth certificate with Obama. The merits of whether or not the birth certificate was real or not were never actually decided by a court. Only the standing of the people bringing the cases was ever decided. So we haven't actually had, people have this common perception that the birth certificate issue is settled and done and taken care of. No, it wasn't. It was never decided. It was just that the parties that kept coming in and fussing and stewing, the court said, well, you don't have standing, you don't have a right to say anything here, it's not your business, go away. And the merits of whether that fraudulent document was real or fake or what it meant was never actually decided by a court. Even though people raised the issue, the courts didn't settle the matter based on those issues. They settled it on, well, you don't have, a place to make an argument. So the American citizens and Texas itself, when it says, hey, these other states, they're trying to manipulate the federal vote and get an outcome that's against the interests of Texas, and all these other states join in Texas, and we're going to fight this together. And the courts said, well, we don't think you have a case against this other state, and you can't join the Texas lawsuit, and so it's divide and conquer. And then, yeah, there's no case here because you don't have standing to raise such a claim. The vote itself, the legitimacy of the vote, wasn't argued in time to stop this swearing in. Now, to get precisely to the question you just asked me, What's the role of the military in this situation today? If America has been captured by enemies domestic, the Al Capones, if Chicago is now not just running Chicago, but running the whole country, well, it's an internal problem. Police are used internally. Military is to foreign enemies. We don't use, with the Posse Comitatus laws, we don't use the military against American citizens, except in certain very limited situations. If a foreign enemy has breached the wall, has got to a certain point, and then the nation, the republic, the Constitution is under threat, and the policing is not capable of repulsing that threat, of protecting the citizenry, the military can be used under, guard rules and governors, etc., against a threat, be it a natural disaster or an invading army, such as what's about to happen down on the Mexican-Texas border, Mexican-Arizona border, Mexican-California border, with all these immigrants coming up from Guatemala right now. With an external threat, now the military can have to take action. But let's think about, it's not just what's happened in the vote machines inside of America. Where was the threat originally? President Trump, when he was still candidate Trump, before he won in 2016 and then took office in 2017, he was attacked. He was attacked by British intelligence and by a banking cartel working out of the City of London with a false dossier saying that the Russians had compromised Trump in his business dealings, and then were promoting him to become president of the United States, and secretly attacking people that were enemies of Trump in his campaign so that he could become the victor in the election here in America. And then that the Russians, by controlling Trump with this secret sex tapes, this secret knowledge of what he did with prostitutes in Russia, pissing on the bed that Obama had slept in, and all of this nefarious stuff, that the Russians had some leverage over President Trump and could use it to get Trump to do things in a way that favored Russia. And so this Russian dossier was put together by these foreign entities with foreign interests outside the United States in the City of London, the banking city, against candidate Trump. And by the way, that piece of shit, that lying piece of shit Halper, Halper is the guy, he worked in the Reagan administration. He was essentially a spy inside the Reagan administration for George H.W. Bush, former head of CIA before he became vice president. And what you haven't heard, except probably from me, is that he was the banking side of Iran-Contra. He's the unindicted co-conspirator on Iran-Contra. The money and gun running operation, which President Reagan said happened under his watch, but was not fully understood or known by him, but he had to take responsibility for it when he did his national press conference out of the Oval Office. Who was actually running that? That was George H.W. Bush, former head of CIA. And the banker on Iran-Contra was Halper. Well, because Halper was an unnamed co-conspirator, unindicted co-conspirator during Iran-Contra, he skates free. Where does he go? He goes over to London. And then he gets dual British citizenship, not just U.S., but dual British citizenship. And he's a professor at Cambridge. And from Cambridge, he's also providing advisory role, serving an advisory role to Department of Defense here in the U.S. and looking at foreign policy and all sorts of stuff, getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars from the U.S. government for his advisory role. And what did Halper do? He's the one that came up with the plot to try to use a honeypot, a young female, to entice George Papadopoulos to betray his wife and become, complicit in some spying activity and taint President-elect or at that time candidate Trump on Russian collusion, and to paint a picture of him that wasn't true. Halper came up with that plot. Halper is the one that was behind the scenes manipulating the ideas of creating the idea of a Russian collusion project with Trump to get Trump elected, that he was sold out to Russian masters. He came up with that whole lying scam on foreign soil. This is a person with both American and British citizenship, because he moved over there to Cambridge after he escaped any kind of exposure during Iran-Contra. And so he's still a threat. When Ollie North and Fawn Hall were destroying records and spiriting them out of the White House in her boots and bra, the records related to the banking, the money, which wasn't ever really raised in Iran-Contra. If you go to the war or the Tower Commission report, doesn't go into those details very far. Why? Because you found Halper there. So Halper survived all of that. And he's still out there loose. He's a missile looking for the next target and getting paid by people inside our government to keep him viable and credible with his job, and getting paid by British MI6 to keep him viable. And then at the critical moment when they need him to help take down a person that might be a threat to their machine, their system, he's paid off, and he comes in, tries to become part of the Trump campaign, tries to become an advisor in the incoming Trump administration, tries to take out various officials, just like Flynn, taking down Flynn because he's a threat to them, because he knows where all the bodies are buried. So what happens is these are foreign individuals coming together in an intelligence operation, MI6, they're equivalent to our CIA, MI5, they're equivalent to our FBI, Italian intelligence operatives and facilities where the vote was being cooked and managed by Brit operatives also that were down there in Italy, and NATO allies using Italian and NATO facilities to move the data through satellite systems and into the American system through Canada. All of this work that was being done, that's an external threat. That is a war by another means. It's not a ship on the sea with guns blazing, blasting Volkswagens into America and blowing up buildings 3,000 miles an hour through the air. It's not aircraft. It's not tanks. It's a digital war to capture the flag of your country, to capture control of your country by deciding which leaders get to be in charge. Not the leaders that the American people would vote, but the leaders that these foreign manipulators would vote in, to capture a country in a militarized, digital, war by another means operation. And that's what happened here. The military, the U.S. military, is it supposed to defend America? If the policing action, if Congress, if the courts can't be made to protect America, if they've failed to protect America, if they're so captured that they won't act to protect because of being compromised by one means or another, honeypotted, blackmailed, bribed, murdered, under threat of murder, exposure. If they're so compromised, captured, that they can't act or won't act to protect the Constitution, the contract of the American people with its government, to protect the American people's role as the owners and supervisors of the government, if they can't protect from Congress and the courts that contract with America, and are going to let the alligator loose in the kitchen and the rest of the house to destroy the rest of the house, who's left to protect America? And it's my contention that at the moment, on January 19th, the Director of National Intelligence, who runs 17 agencies, 16 intelligence investigative agencies in the U.S., and then the 17th agency is the Office of National Intelligence, the Director of the National Intelligence's office, and he manages the other 16. So 17 total. Another key number. Why? Because got to brand everything they do. 5-sided building. 17. Their worship of Osiris. 17 agencies to run all the investigative functions here in the country, intelligence functions. When the Director of National Intelligence, under executive order from President Trump, from the action from September 12th, I believe it was, 2018, had to report on any foreign interference in the national election within 45 days of the end of the election. Back in December of 2020, that report was supposed to be presented to the president and to the other agency heads. It wasn't, because there was an argument over the content and what the meaning was. And finally, on January 19th, that report was delivered a month late, the day before President Trump was to leave office. And that report showed foreign interference in the U.S. election sufficient to change the outcome of the election. But with 1 day left, having failed all of the intervening time since the November 3rd election, with 1 day left, Congress still failed to act to protect the American people, to do something to protect the vote in America. And then the courts, the Supreme Court, also failed to act to protect the American people against this digital attack on our ability to elect a leader of our choosing. And so 24 hours later, at noon on January 20th, when Joe Biden was sworn in as President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, the leader of the free world, leader of America, up until that moment in time, the military didn't actually have a specific function. They could monitor, they can use military intelligence to monitor all the information, to sift and probe and look at every possible angle of the threat. But our country isn't run by a military junta. It's not run by generals. The generals answer to civilian authorities. That's the way it's laid out. The commander-in-chief is elected by the people to administer the country from the executive office position. The military is subservient to him. However, at the point that Congress and the courts allowed a person to be sworn in and put in a position to take control of the fort, the American defense system against enemies foreign, if they have knowledge, which, by the way, the Director of National Intelligence report provides the information, the knowledge, the data showing that there was foreign interference sufficient to overturn the outcome of the election. If they have data showing that at the military level, and they know that somebody who's not the American people's elected representative is then going to be put into power, they have the obligation to protect us against enemies, foreign and domestic, both of which are in play here. And did not, it would be my contention, functionally, tangibly hand over control of the military, lock, stock, and barrel, to Joe Biden. They instead began an internal investigation to complete and verify and vet and validate the information that was provided in the Director of National Intelligence report, and come independently to their own conclusion. Those military leaders were protecting America and doing their job as they were in position to do. And because there was no missiles flying at America at that exact instant, the need to come to a rapid, instantaneous conclusion at the exact seconds or moment that Joseph Biden was sworn in this agreed upon act by the Supreme Court and the Congress, which the military did not buy into, the leaders in the military did not buy into, then they began their own internal assessment, comparing their intelligence data through their military intelligence methods and means with the Director of National Intelligence conclusions. And as a result of that, over a period of days and weeks, independently came to the conclusion that the interference was sufficient to change the outcome of the election. Now, the way that the Military Code of Justice is written, if a Manchurian candidate or some foreign power has gained control of the helm of the ship, control of the ship of state, gotten in positions of authority and power over the American people in this office, the military is charged first with protecting the Constitution and the Republic. Well, the Constitution, why? Because that's the contract that gives any validity to there being a federal government over the people. That contract, that Constitution, has been violated and broken. The military is charged with protecting it and restoring it. So what happens next is the military doesn't immediately go out and take action. It first protects the people, the nation, the Constitution, the Republic, the states. And then, as quickly as possible, and this is where a lot of people get mixed up. They think that the military should be out there doing arrests right now and taking control and doing stuff. Now, the military's protection, if there was threats that were, some individual threat that could cumulatively have threatened the Republic or whatever, they could do arrests. But their primary thing is to restore lawful civilian authorities to control over the country. In the case of the executive office, to restore a lawful civilian president to office. Now, if the result of the election, in this case, could not be known, if it was so screwed up, if the data was so scrambled in all the computer banks somehow that you couldn't tell what the vote was or who did it, then perhaps they'd have to do some kind of a militarily administered revote for the country. But that's not what's going on here. The vote is actually quite knowable. The majority of the states clearly voted decisively for President Trump. The handful of states that were in question that flipped the vote over, that digital data, that 3 o'clock in the morning stopped the count and then put in a new set of numbers and algorithms in place to flip it over. In that forensic analysis of the digital data from this digital attack that's been done, shows clearly that President Trump not just won, but won decisively. A mammoth win. including in those states. So the military has to place the lawful person who won the election in office, not do a revote, just recognize the true outcome of the vote and place that person back in authority. But does the military do that for the whole country or just for its section? As a first step, lawful civilian authority would be recognized by the military as the winner of that election, which in this case was Donald Trump. And that win, with them recognizing that, they hand the reins of power. As Mao said, all power emanates from the barrel of a gun. Who has the biggest gun here? Is it police departments? Is it states, even with their National Guard? Or is it the American military who has the biggest gun? When the military doesn't let President Biden run around on Air Force One, when the military doesn't let President Biden tell them what to do precisely, even if they allow illusions of power and military action to take place. If they're not doing that, it's for a reason. You know, over the White House last couple of days, people have been commenting on the black flag over the White House, just below the American flag, and at a number of other facilities. Well, the black flag, it's a black military POW, missing in action, prisoner of war flag from the Vietnam War era. But these things can have multiple meanings, dual meanings. Why are they flying that flag over the White House right now? Why are they flying it at other facilities right now? It might have some extra meaning. Who's the actual POW at the White House right now? And who's missing in action? There's some games and trolling taking place, and the military, in its role of restoring as quickly as safely possible lawful civilian control first within the military house. Who is the commander-in-chief really supposed to be? Because an enemy attacked us digitally in a digital war against America. Who do they put in office there? And then what does the military do? Once a true, proper, lawful commander-in-chief is in office, in play, then the military answers to the lawful commander. What next? And the lawful commander says we need to do this and this and this. The military, this isn't a military junta of generals running America. That's a South American banana republic thing, where the only way to get lawful control of the country is for generals to do it, because the crime lords have taken over the presidencies and the payoffs, and it's the Chicago mob running the country, the New York mob running the country, the New Jersey mob running the country. Here in America, we put the lawful commander-in-chief into office. That's what the military's role would be initially, based on the Military Code of Justice. Restore lawful civilian authority to their command and control position, the lawful operation of the country, the government. Then to look to that lawful commander-in-chief for direction, how to proceed. The military doesn't do the arrests at the direction of generals, except for some instant protection. They look to the president, and then they do what the president's bidding is. Look, suppose you put Trump or any person in president's office, but the courts are corrupt. Congress is corrupt. They're captured. They've already demonstrated that they're a captured operation. You couldn't get to justice in the Justice Department. You couldn't get to a right review of the vote and the voting machines and practices. They wouldn't hear the case. They wouldn't let the states have a case heard about the states saying, hey, the whole country, all of us states are being run roughshod over by a couple of crooked Chicago mob states that are trying to control the outcome for the whole country and the whole world. You got to stop this. And the court says, well, no, we don't have to. And we're not going to do that. You can't get to justice in the Justice Department. What's left? The president can't turn to the courts because the courts have already shown that they're not reliable. They're not working in the American people's lawful interests. They won't do their job. The president can't turn to Congress because Congress is dysfunctional. It's too captured. Too many of the players are compromised. So you can't get there. Why? How did they get compromised? Well, what do you think was going on at Epstein Island? What do you think's been going on at the Standard Hotel and all these other places? What was WikiLeaks all about? These sex clubs, this perversion, this pedophilia, the Podesta brothers. Why are they so pissed off about Assange and WikiLeaks? What's going on there? Because they're sex clubs and worse. We're being exposed. These hidden manipulations to control our leaders in office all around the world, all around our country. And so you can't get to justice in the Justice Department, and you can't get Congress to work in the interest of the American people because they're interested in their own interests and their buddies' interests, their foreign nationals' interests, their banking, City of London interests. And so what happens next? The only solution, it's a military solution. The new commander-in-chief has to turn back to the military after being put in office and direct the military to go make the arrests. Arrest those people that are compromised, that are working with foreign powers and interests, that didn't safeguard the Constitution, the contract between the American people and its government. And the president directs the military. Take that fucking bunch of shitballs to Gitmo, lock them up, and we'll do our trials there because you can't get to justice in the Justice Department. And that's what's going to happen next.
I think the public is now ready, or at least the majority of it is ready. I think this time has been an important time to have people reflect very deeply. And as you have said in your own casts and your interviews, we have gone through a near-death experience of this nation, which I think at the end will be an important point in our history to hopefully never forget how easy this country can be slipped away if we don't stay vigilant in all that we do. Juan, you have recently released or been part of the release of a film. Obviously, it goes on top of your book, Kid at the Side of the Road. But this film that you debuted down in Nevada, I believe it's Sound of Freedom. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's taking this exactly as you just kind of hit on at the very end of that was the pedophilia issue and the child sex trafficking issue in particular. And we're seeing a resurgence of that again with this borders opening up and the news coming out of the disaster we're seeing with the kids now once again being amassed and then being put in with guardians, so to speak, across the nation. Talk a little bit about that in this film and, what this means to you and what this hopefully will mean to the nation as we move forward here to try to build an awareness, which I personally think is at the center point of really taking back this country. Because my personal opinion is if we can't stand up for our children and stop the sacrifice of our children, the unborn and the young, we violated one of the most basic tenets that God has in our existence, which is to be protectors of those that have no voice.
Well, if you can't protect the innocent, if you can't protect those that are weak in your society, and then you turn to God like he's supposed to protect you, please God, bless us, bless America. I'm looking right now at that fucking monument, that motherfucking monument right there at the center of our unholy city, at the center of power in our country. I'm looking at that thing and you realize that this whole city is built around a sex cult. That sex cult didn't just show up here in America a few days ago, a few years ago, a century ago. it goes all the way back into biblical times, even into Canaan land and Babylon before that. And what was the significance when we think of the Holy Lands and Israel and in biblical times? Oh, it was so wonderful, and King David was there, and there's, all the holy everything, cities and the temple and everything else. That was the best of times and the worst of times. That was this holy place where the seat of God, the throne of God, was first in the tent of meeting, and then the temples that were built by Temple of Solomon and before. When these holy places were built, right there in the same land, what do we see in the scriptures also? We see conversation about on the mountaintops, on the hills, around the holy city, around this holy land. The people were taking their children up to these hilltop sacrificial sites, and they were making their children to pass through the fire. That's a preacher in the pulpit, a 501c3 church way of saying they roasted their children alive, babies alive, in these sacrificial offerings to Baal and Moloch. It's right there in the Bible. What was going on in the land before the people of Israel came out of the desert, out of the Sinai desert, went into Jericho and then the other cities in Canaan land, the land of the children of Cain? What was going on? They were sacrificing children to Baal and Moloch, to Satan, because the devil required them to sacrifice their children in order to have a good harvest, to have health and other things. So they were literally roasting their children alive for gain, sacrificing them to Satan. And then you look at what's going on in America and the rest of the world. We look the other way. We even protect people that do things that we would personally find hideous, unacceptable here in America. The way countries like Saudi Arabia treat their women, like slaves internally. We as a country promote that. I've talked recently several times about the situation in Libya. King Idris was running Libya up until 1967, and they had slave bazaars right there in Tripoli, and the Marine Corps him to the shores of Tripoli. What was going on? Slave trading. It's been going on for centuries. And when Hillary sat there and cackled about Gaddafi, we came, we saw, he died. Well, after her cackling was done, the slave bazaar that Gaddafi closed in downtown Tripoli in 1967, in 2012, was reopened. And slaves have been being traded, children, young children, women and boys, girls and boys, have been being bought and sold in a slave bazaar in Tripoli. And who allowed that to happen under their watch? It wasn't just Obama. It was the American people. It was your Air Force that was used to close the skies over Libya so that Gaddafi couldn't protect himself. I mean, not like Gaddafi if you want, but he's the one that was giving us information on the phone, his intelligence people with our intelligence people, way before 9/11, giving us information about what was going on over there and after, and the groups that were conspiring and plotting to do things in the Mideast. I've talked about that extensively before. When Gaddafi was out, these people get the slave bazaar back in. Who were we pushing and promoting that allowed that to happen? I've already talked extensively in other places about that. I won't get into that now. But with that in mind, we as a people have a responsibility to protect children and innocent, and we as a people haven't done that. The kids coming in from Mexico, freight containers on ships coming in from all over the world with children in them, and then trafficked here in America. And numerous guys have talked about that. We've had seizures, we've had kids discovered. That's not a myth, that's a reality. And it's being looked the other way on by people inside of our government. There's collusion here on what's going on there. We have to stop this. And if we can't stop the trading and the pedophiling of children with the protection, with the sins by omission of not seeing some of this trafficking occurring in America and in places under our protection, if we can't stop it, why would you expect God to protect you? You won't act to protect the innocent. You're not acting in a godly manner. And then you went, oh, God bless America, give me a good harvest to whatever. We're as evil as the land that we went in to invade. The people of Israel went into Canaan land and set up their religion and put all their houses up. And then within a generation, they're doing exactly what the people were doing when they came in there. They're sacrificing children to the devil. And in America, what's being allowed? Hey, Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, those were protected operations. And what were they doing? Is it just the pedophilia of children at those locations and the Justice Department looking the other way and giving Jeffrey Epstein a slap on the hand? Why? Because he's working for the intelligence agencies. Those people that were being compromised when they came to the island and filmed and photographed into the university system. Yeah, professors, teachers, people running these university systems were pedophiles. And they were getting caught on tape, and then they were being manipulated. Who gets the promotion? Who gets the degree? Who gets to get the high office in some location, the corporation, etc.? Who's managing those people? That's CIA, MI6, Mossad, other intelligence agencies, all with a secret handshake, working on behalf of who? Bankers, foreign nationals, foreign governments, bloodlines. All of them involved in compromising and blackmailing and honeypotting these people. The document that Lynn Wood presented with the deposition the other day, and what's the guy say in the deposition? That the way that they gained power through various government agencies, through corporate entities, etc., in that document, they handed off children, adopted, born to themselves or others that they could control by whatever means. They traded children like trading cards to get higher office, to get positions of authority and control over you, over the American people, out into the world. That was a pedophile sex club. And we see this stuff going on with the Salinas family in Mexico and the people running them that are the money, and controlling how America operates, how Mexico operates, how other South American countries operate, through the trafficking of children all over the world. Where we have to start to get these people under control and out of office, the alligator really is this pedophile sex club operations going on all over the world. I will talk about it in the future, even the stuff that Nixon ran into and found, and the way he tried to come against it with the Houston Project and others. These sex clubs, which have degenerated down into pedophilia clubs and worse, are what is running and has been running America for a very long time. And the film Sound of Freedom is an opening salvo, a beginning point to help wake the public up to what's been going on right under their noses in plain sight out across America and the world. And it's a battle cry for us to regain control of our country and then go out into the world and be not our brother's keeper, but to be our brother's brother. And anybody that doesn't think that that's how things are running or that I'm overstating it, what's in the middle of a fucking city that's at the center of your country that you're bowing down to with all of your tax money, all of your laborers turned into cash that's handed off to the federal government to run you? And what's at the center of that city? That fucking monument. That's what's there. It is a religious symbol in this religious city to control you and honor their sex gods and the control over you and your children. God's children are not for sale. We will not be your slaves anymore. That's the way it is. America's coming back. We're going to take control of our country and our government. And unfortunately, the only option at this point in time isn't citizens with pitchforks. It will be the military option after lawful civilian authority is put into power as the American people voted for. And then that lawful civilian authority will administer the direction that the country goes through the military regaining control of these locations and facilities so that we can get our country back for American citizens' benefit, not for a bunch of globalist, pedophile thugs and Satan-worshiping thieves the way that they want it to be.
Man, that just sums it right up. The fact is that I think people have a hard time really facing how dark and evil this is. And I think it comes from a lot of years of being shaped and a lot of years of being conditioned to believe that what you think you're seeing is wrong, to being told that to look the other way, to being containerized and channeled in this world in such a way that the evils seem out of touch. And it is truly dark and evil. I think that in the process of this, it will be a wake-up call and a shaking of the soul of the nation. So as we kind of wrap this up, Juan, what's your thoughts on that process of the waking up of America? Your film that you put out, The Perfect Day, it's a brilliantly done piece. And as a filmmaker myself, I will say that it's an absolutely impressive piece of bringing together a story with many, many layers that one has to pay attention to the details, which I think is a big lesson in itself. As we go forward here, and I advocate the same thing you say, that this is not a war of pitchforks. This is a war of faith and strength, of standing up, being bold, even defiant. But as we go forward here, what would you say to people in the sense of keeping their faith, keeping their focus forward, and what their commitment is to this nation?
Well, with the things that are going to happen here shortly, the mainstream media, as it currently exists, is trying to program people's minds to think that what will happen, what must happen, is somehow the makings of a civil war, that it's somehow illegal or unjust. It's the exact opposite. It's not illegal or unjust. It is the lawful exercise of the people's will by the military, protecting the people's will in the Constitution. And to the extent that they would twist that, they become irrelevant themselves. They've picked a side, and it's against the American people. And the will of the American people. The new media that you represent, properly explaining this, properly putting it in perspective for people, you're valid. because you represent reality, and you represent the will of the American people, and you represent the right of the American people to have that conversation and make it happen. The fact that we're going to come after these monsters and displace them out of office and take control of the country may not be pleasant and easy, but it's what has to be done. And in working that through, it's not a civil war, it's a revolutionary war. The attack came from foreign shores. America had a revolution against the bloodlines, the king, the Brits. And that's why the Constitution was written, this alliance, this coming together of the states against what had become a foreign enemy. Washington, D.C., in the way that it's administering against the American people, doing the bidding of foreign masters, promoting this false Russian collusion thing, and protecting a fake vote, a false vote, a digital Pearl Harbor against America, has become the enemy of the American people in the way it administers. And so we're in the middle of a revolutionary war against foreign entities taking over power and control in our country. That's America coming together against a foreign enemy. If you hear people saying that we're having a civil war, that we're destroying things internally, that, you know, we're supposedly going with pitchforks to do whatever, no, we're not. This isn't a civil war. And we're not going to burn down our own house to save it. We're going to catch those monsters by the tail, and we're going to throw them in Gitmo. We're going to retake lawful authority of government operations in America, and we're going to do it through a legal, proper means, which is get the executive that we voted for back into office, and then that executive that we voted for is going to make the correct decisions to safely bring America back together again under lawful authority, and take it away from those who are illegal, who are unlawful, who are not the ones we voted for. And we're not going to burn our own house down. We're not going to tear it apart. Even if we have agent provocateurs that are put into our midst trying to pull it off, we, the American people, will pull them down off the buildings. We'll stop them clubbing the windows out. If they open up the doors to try and invite us to do wrong, we're not going to do it en masse. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people were there present at Congress on January 6th and never entered the building unlawfully. A handful that might have to look around with some agent provocateurs that did some mischief. Well, that's a little different story, but we're not going to fall for that. And we see how we're being baited to fall for that. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to support our military, the people that are our fellow citizens in these lawful positions, to go do what they have to do under the lawful authority's direction as we take our country back. And that's not a civil war. That's a revolutionary war against foreign enemies operating on U.S. soil with treasonous, seditious, traitorous cooperation by some Americans who themselves have shown that they don't deserve the title American.
That's a Teddy Rooseveltian perspective right there, which I agree with completely. You're either an American or you're not. There's no room for a 50-50 American, and I think we've really come back to that. One, I want to thank you very much for your time today. It's an absolute honor to have you on this program. I'm looking forward to getting this program out. You've been a very constant voice and a big motivation, and I want to thank you as well. And when you find your interviews out there, it's a grounding point because it's like a check when you're moving along and you're doing your research and you're looking at the things, and then you find other voices out there that are speaking boldly and with the range of historical knowledge that you have and the connecting of the past to the present. I think it's such an essential perspective that we have to continue to bring. So I'm thanking you personally as well, because it's been an important part of my process here as I found your voice just to be another one of those reinforcing points to keep me steady on the path.
I appreciate all the kind words. I appreciate everybody that stuck it out to listen to this long diatribe. I know a lot of the folks have heard me say much of this stuff previously. I hope this is, while it's long, it's kind of condensed from other places where I've said similar things, and that I appreciate that they stuck it out long enough to hear it one more time. But, sometimes you have to hear things a few times to fully grasp it, and I hope that is what happened here. The one thing I would say in conclusion is, in my book, page 71, Reversing the 17, I use the equation election equals mega cubed over corn. Corn are these fake leaders, these, when you go to the FBI or CIA and they're training young people to go out and work as operatives, undercover, etc. Their farm is where they get trained. And so these people are farm products. We kid about them being the corn. And they're put into office over us in various places. And you see all these people with these intelligence agency backgrounds. And then they miraculously, magically find themselves in, these agency heads and in elected offices. And they're doing the bidding of people that aren't the American people. They've really become agent provocateurs, leveraged in positions of authority. And so the election 2020 was all about election equals mega, those that would make America great again, return sovereignty to the American people, return our right to industrialize our country and reindustrialize it, to mine right here at home, to have energy produced right here at home. The Make America Great Again crowd versus this corn crowd that wants this global everything, the greening of planet Earth. Yeah, and you're going to be the fertilizer. So I said election 2020 equals Make America Great Again cubed, or 3, over corn. E equals M3 over corn. But for election 2022, the one that's coming, that will be when the American people finally come together in a unified fashion, more completely than ever before in recent memory, probably back even before the country was founded. And I say election 2022 is election equals mega, Make America Great Again, quadrupled over the corn here in the country, because I think America's coming together in an amazing way. And we're going to be galvanized. We're going to be solidified as we find out how we've been managed and manipulated and maneuvered by these pedophiles, by these people that are sold out to global interests for the gain of their family over the American family, for the gain of themselves personally, to feed their addictions, to feed their perversions, sold out to the devil himself. And when America realizes what's being done in their name by these people and comes against it, we will come together because we are a God-fearing nation. That's what you saw on January 6th, was those of faith coming together, putting their foot down to re-own their country and to stomp out this illegal occupation of America in this unholy city, this federal city, to capture us. But beyond that, and you asked me, how the American people are doing this, how they're going to come together. The third election that I'm looking at 2 elections ahead, 2024. Earth's election energy at the 2024 time period must equal mega, but spelled differently. Make Earth great again to the 5th power, quintupled, over global corn. We have a lot of fights ahead. We're going to get our country back. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be biblical. It's going to be unbelievable to many people, to most people. They aren't going to believe what's about to happen next. But that won't be enough, because when we're through getting control of our own house and setting it in order and kicking out all the demons, and all of the countertops and walls are dusted and free of all the perversion and slime and filth, when we've got our house cleaned up and organized and decorated again, and we've brought in the Spirit of God to occupy our house again, the true God in heaven, not this satanic slime God. When we've kicked the reptiles out of control of our country and we have our house in order, then we will turn to the world, not to be our brother's keeper, not to run the world our way, but to be our brother's brother. When Cain said, when God came looking for Abel, where's your brother? And Cain says, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? It's a wrong answer. You're your brother's brother. You're your brother's brother. We are going to go and be our brother's brother out to the world. And we're going to stop the pedophilia. We're going to stop the monsters. We're going to protect the innocent. We're going to protect the weak. We're going to do our mission before God the way we're supposed to do it, and be our brother's brother, and thereby not earn judgment from God, but instead get blessing from God. We're going to go from win to win to win. We are going to be winning every day because we're doing the will of God. We're protecting the innocents. We're kicking these assholes into Gitmo and worse. We'll deliver them to God for him to do the judgment. But we're going to get our country back, and we're going to get the world back, and the children of Adam will prevail in the end. And you're about to see that in your lifetime. Take it to the bank.
I'll take it to the bank. I'll even buy you a steak dinner to share the celebration. That'll be great. So, Juan, thank you very much. On back channel, I'm gonna have you send me some sort of contact information so I can send you some of our new swag that's coming out. I think you'll like it. It's pretty good. We got some stuff, so I just want to thank you for that. But anyway, thank you very much.
Hey, I appreciate everybody sticking around, and appreciate so much you give me the opportunity to talk with your folks, and I hope this helps.
If you don't mind, I'd just like to close with a prayer, if that's okay with you.
Yes, please.
Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this blessed meeting, an opportunity to once again explore the depths of knowledge and the strength of our faith. Lord, we're truly blessed with the voices that continue to help us understand the complexities of this fight, to see clearly through a fog of deception, and to understand the true meaning of the words that are given to us through Scripture and the wisdom given to us through time. Lord, we ask that you'll continue to bless Juan and all that he does moving forward, to continue to inspire patriots to stand in your name and to stand boldly as we face this evil and re-empower the bloodline of Adam. And we say these things in Christ's holy name. Amen.
Amen.
So thanks for tuning in. Remember, if you like the channel, please hit subscribe, like the episode, and share it on your favorite social media forum. The Bards FM podcast can be found on Podbean at www.bards.fm. It can also be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and YouTube by entering Bards FM in the search bar on the respective apps or websites. And if you would like to support the channel with a donation link is below. All podcasts are written and produced by Scott Kesterson. Opinions expressed are the individual's only. Interpretations of events are the sole rights and opinions of the podcast presenter and guests. Bards FM, Bards of War, Fighting is Everything, and Expedition Cafe are trademarks of Scott Kesterson and Expedition Cafe. All work is owned and copyrighted by Scott Kesterson and Expedition Cafe. Thank you again. You have been listening to the Bards FM podcast. This is Scott Kesterson, out for now.